So there's a story that I read first, I think I read it first in a book by Wayne Muller called How Then Shall We Live? He's actually one of my favorite authors. But he recounts the story from Jack Kornfield, who's also a motivational speaker, teacher, writer. In the book, he talks about this tribe in Africa, where the birth of a child is not measured by when they actually were born into the world, but it's measured by the first time a mother receives the awareness that she's going to have a child. And so she receives this awareness of this child that wants to be born through her. And she goes out by herself and sits under a tree and listens for the song of the child that wants to come through her. She learns this song. And then she goes back to her village and she teaches the song to her mate. And they sing the song together while the child is being conceived. And while she's pregnant with the child, she teaches that song to the midwives of the tribe, all the elders of the tribe. Everyone learns each child's song. And as that child grows, they sing the song to the child. And so they're all in community together with this child and learning their song. And if that child falls and injures itself, then they sing the song to the child to remind him or her who they really are. And if they do something that somehow offends someone else or somehow out of integrity with the rules of the tribe, they don't punish the child or condemn the child. Instead, what do? They sing the song of the child to remind the child who she really is. And so the whole tribe comes together in helping each other to know who they truly are. And even at the last breath of the child, the tribe gathers around and sings the song to the child. And I think it's a beautiful story. And the reason I share it today is because it reminds me of the true essence of forgiveness. What I believe is the true essence of forgiveness. And today I'm talking about it as it relates primarily to self-forgiveness. But I believe the essence of forgiveness, as I understand it, is returning, self-forgiveness is returning to the awareness of who I truly am. Because I believe that that essence of who I am is always calling me. When I get out there somewhere and I forget, when I get attached to the things of the world or the things I think I should be doing or trying to make things happen or trying to be who I think I should be, then I'm losing sight of who I truly am. And I don't know about you, but I do that occasionally. But I believe the essence of who we are, the song of who we are, that's that beautiful, unique, wondrous expression of what we in unity call the Christ, which is the essence of each and every one of us, expressed in unique and wonderful ways, that Christ is always calling us home to the remembrance of it as who we truly are. And I do believe that if I could live in constant connection, constant awareness with that self, with that true self, that divine self, the Christ of me, then I could only possibly live in the recognition of the Christ of you. But when I forget the Christ of me, I sometimes forget the Christ of you. And I think that when I forget is really the only time that I would ever do anything or say anything or act in any way out of integrity with that. But I've been known to do that. And I think that is the essence of forgiveness. We would only do something that is out of integrity with our Christ nature if we've forgotten who that is. Do you agree with that? And so that's the essence, I think, of self-forgiveness, is returning to that. We would only do it if we're out of our minds, really. Today, my lesson is called Temporary Insanity. Because when we get so focused out there, we're not in our right minds. We're not in the mind of God that we talk about, the mind of God that is filled with, replete with ideas, divine ideas like love and joy and harmony and order and abundance and all of those ideas that we associate with the divine that is the life of us. Now, I think, as I said, that's the essence of forgiveness, is coming back home to that. Self-forgiveness is recognizing that as the first step. And I've been reading and rereading Archbishop Desmond Tutu's book, The Book of Forgiveness. It's also co-written by his daughter, Mpho Tutu, about forgiveness. And in the book, they talk about the importance of self-forgiveness. But they also talk about, they say in the book that they recommend that you ask, if you did something to offend someone, to stimulate pain for someone, that it's important maybe to ask for their forgiveness before you do your self-forgiveness work. And personally, I'm not sure I agree with that. Although, they're probably more of an expert than I am. But the way I see it is that it's important for me to do my self-forgiveness work before I go to someone else and ask for their forgiveness. Because if I'm not doing my self-forgiveness work, the energy of my guilt and shame is going to block my ability to connect with the other person. I'm going to be coming at them through this whole filter of, oh, I'm a horrible person, or oh my God, I'm so guilty for what I did. And can you imagine when that is in between me and the other person, what probably is going to happen? It's probably not going to be a real, honest, sincere connection. So I think it's important for us to do our self-forgiveness work first. And I think the beginning of that, the beginning of self-forgiveness, is recognizing that I was temporarily insane. Temporarily insane. When I did the thing that I did that stimulated pain for someone else, when I said the thing I did that stimulated pain for someone else, when I offended someone, even if it wasn't intentional, most of the time it is not. And you may be thinking, well, I don't have anything that I need to forgive myself for. I used to think that too. Until I started exploring forgiveness at a deeper level. And I think it's important. I'm holding on to energy sometimes around that. So when you claim temporary insanity, what I want to say about that is it's not about denying responsibility for what you did. I'm not saying that at all. It's not about justifying. It's not about denying. It's not about condoning. It's not about in any way letting yourself off the hook for what you did. But I think it is a place that we can get to, hopefully, of understanding and compassion and empathy for ourselves. And you would only want to do self-forgiveness if you are already in a place of self-awareness that there's something that you did. Your conscience, you might be feeling guilty. Brené Brown talks about that in her books. She does a lot of shame research. She talks about how guilt is healthy because it keeps us on track. It helps us to know when we've done something that's out of integrity with our values. And so when we feel guilt, we know that we've been out of integrity with something we value. Shame, on the other hand, she says guilt says I did something wrong or bad. Shame says I am bad or wrong. And so it's important, I think, for us to clear that up. And what came to me about that this week, again, is doing that work to get back to the point of knowing who we are. But it also requires our willingness to admit that we did the thing that we did, or said the thing that we said, or didn't do the thing that we didn't do. And to own that. And to feel what it feels like to own it. But then also to give ourselves empathy and compassion for that. How was I out of integrity with what I value? Well, how was I living out of integrity with what I value? How would I might have done it differently? And then am I willing to share that with someone else? Brené Brown talks about that too, is about how shame unexpressed keeps us stuck in that place of insanity. She doesn't use those words, those are my words, but it keeps us stuck in that place of insanity. We give it power when we don't verbalize it, when we don't talk about the things that we did. It becomes our dirty little secret that keeps us stuck. And I didn't say this last week, but I'm going to say it this week. Sometimes we need help. Sometimes we need to reach out to professionals to help us work through these things. Sometimes we need a therapist. Sometimes we need a 12-step sponsor. Sometimes we need a minister. Sometimes we need somebody that we can confide in. So reach out for help when you realize you need help. That's so important. But I think sometimes, as I love what Robert Song talked about, it came to me this week, that sometimes we just have to get to that place where we're just willing to own it. And to a place where we touch the pain so much that we have to let it down. We have to let it go. We have to change. We have to begin to accept who we are. I was aware this week, as I said, I didn't think there was a lot I needed to forgive myself for. And I'm just saying this as an example to you of something I realized for myself. I remember, and I have suppressed it for a really long, long time. My father was an alcoholic. We did not have a good relationship during his lifetime. My mother died when I was 15 years old, and so my father was my parent as well as he could be. But he was an alcoholic, and so anytime I was around him, he was pretty much drunk and unavailable. And you know what? I was angry about that. I resented that, even though I really wasn't in touch with that. And because I was not in touch with who I truly am or who he truly is still, I lied to him. I stole from him. I manipulated him. I did all sorts of things that he may not have even been aware of. But I can own that today. And yes, I still have some self-forgiveness work to do around that. Because he died in 2003. I won't have an opportunity to speak to him face to face about that. But it's important for me to own that, to admit that, and to be willing to get help from that if I need that. Because that's my self-forgiveness work. And I think it's important for me to clean it up because as I talked about last week, unforgiveness creates within us a block of energy. When we are hanging on to unforgiveness, which is resentment, blame, judgment, all of those energies, all of that stuff, then we are not an open vessel for the energy of life to flow through us. We are the ones that is blocking it. We are the ones that are blocking it. I am the one that is blocking it. I am the one that's hanging on to it. And I am the only one that can let it go. I am the only one that has the ability to let it go. And it is important for us to let it go, to remember who we truly are, to free ourselves of those unforgiving states within us so that we can live vibrant, prosperous lives of connected relationships and all of the good that we want to have in our lives. Because if we don't, we're going to continue to feel the blocking of the energy of that, and our bodies respond to that. We create diseases around that. And so it's our choice, and that's really why I'm talking about forgiveness last week and this week and probably next week, because I'm newly awakened to the importance of the process of letting it go. And the other thing that I think is important to forgive myself for, two things. One is the story I told about myself. The story I told about myself in respect to what I did. That I'm a bad person, I was a bad son, I was a jerk, I was uncaring. And all of that may be true as a behavior, but the behavior does not define who we are. Yes, we can acknowledge the behavior, we can acknowledge the words, we can acknowledge what we did, but it doesn't need to define us. So look at the story that you're telling yourself about yourself and do what you can to change the story. And the other part of that is, I have to look at the story I was telling about my father, because it was my story, that he deserved everything I gave him. And so I get to change my story. Because as long as I'm holding somebody else outside of the truth, outside of the light of the Christ, outside of the light of God, guess who else gets held outside the light? Me. And as long as I'm holding myself outside of the light of God, I cannot possibly recognize it in you. It is not possible. Do you understand that? That's an important piece for us to get. And if I did not say anything else today, I want to say that very clearly to all of us. If you have unforgiveness to clean up, clean it up. If you are holding yourself as undeserving of love and forgiveness and the light of God, clean it up. Because until we accept ourselves as the light of God, the Christ in expression, there is absolutely, positively no way that we are going to be able to see it in each other. Does that make sense? Do you get that? How important that is? How important that is. Because we just project it onto each other. And we see that playing out in our world every day. Who do you believe you are? Do you really accept your divinity? Are you willing to let go of everything that stands in the way of that divinity? And I'm going to tell you, it's not always easy. It's not always fast. Sometimes it takes work. That dirty 4-letter word. Work. sometimes it takes our willingness to just do the work. But do you want to be free? Do you want to be happy? Do you want to be prosperous? Do you want to have loving, supportive relationships? Do you want to have a healthy body? Do you want to have longevity? You want to have vitality? It's our choice. It's our choice to clean up anything that's in the way. Nobody else is responsible. We got to let that go. No one else is going to do it for us. It's ours to do. And if we want to create a world that works for everybody, we get to do our work every day. Every day.